everyone, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Actually, hold on. I'm gonna swap this plant out. This feels a little more apt for the topic of the video because today, friends, I'm gonna be chatting through my favorite romance novels or giving you guys some romance book recommendations. I love making this video every year. I think I've been making it every year in February for, I don't know, the past 4 or 5 years. Romance is something I just personally always really enjoy, and I would say in the past year my appreciation for it has grown immensely. Before, I really was more focused on kind of romantic subplot lines within some of my favorite fantasy worlds, but in the past year I have also started to really love just romance in general, that genre. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the recommendations. So structurally speaking, I have 3 different groups of romance recommendations, so hopefully you will find something in this video that you will love and enjoy. The first group is true traditional steamy romance full of all the tropes we know and love within that genre. The next group is some fantasy novels that have really wonderful and pretty central romantic plot lines. These books offer a really great mix if you're looking for something that has a romantic subplot line but also some other elements to it as well. And then the last set of groups are what I'm calling kind of the sugar cookie, melt your heart book recommendations. Some really sweet and just ooey gooey, adorable romance recs that should hopefully put a smile on your face. So without further ado, let's dive into the traditional steamy romance recommendations, starting with one of my favorite authors, Talia Hibbert. So I have read 2 books by this author and I have loved both of them. And for the series I've read, they actually kind of live and exist within the same world and kind of central a different sister within each one. Of the 2 romance books of hers I've read, she uses kind of different romance tropes, so there's definitely something out there for everyone depending on your preference and what you like to read in terms of romance stories. But what I can say is consistent across both of them is wonderful characters and banter and steamy scenes and just a to die for romance that also has a central family component as well. The 2 books of hers I've read I've also really love. The first one is Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which is a hate to love romance. So lots of angst and lots of drama, but ultimately about 2 people falling in love despite the fact that they hate each other. This follows our main character Chloe, who is a chronically ill computer geek, and she essentially makes a bucket list because she wants to get a life. And one of those items on the bucket list is to have a meaningless hookup. Enter Red, a handsome handyman with tattoos that lives in her building. Things begin to get complicated from there. So much fun. I love Chloe and Red's relationship. It builds really organically and again, so funny. But then the other book I'd really recommend by Talia Hibbert is probably my favorite of the 2, and that is Take a Hint, Dani Brown. And this is more of a fake dating, friends to lovers, friends to benefits to lovers story that is so cute. It will melt your heart so much. And this follows our main character, Dani Brown, who's currently pursuing her PhD. She's personally not really interested in having a serious relationship. She's incredibly busy and very focused on her career. Enter Zafir, a really handsome security guard at her university building, and also a fire drill gone wrong that kind of makes the 2 of them go viral. So due to a variety of circumstances, they begin to fake date and ultimately fall in love. I love this story for so many reasons. One, Zafir and Dani as 2 main characters, so cute. And Zafir is one of those kind of protagonists who's grumpy to everyone but is secretly soft on the inside and like listens to romance novels on audiobook while he's working and is like only soft for Dani. It's just adorable and really about like 2 people confronting their own personal obstacles, learning to kind of like love and accept another person in their life. It's amazing. But Talia Hibbert writes wonderful romance, and I'm personally really excited to read the 3rd book in the series that's coming out, I believe, in the next couple of months, but these are excellent, steamy, so funny, lovable cast of characters. You can't go wrong. Next romance series I would recommend is the Girl Meets Duke series by Tessa Dare. This was a whole personal journey for me about this time last year. This was some of my first historical romance that I read and loved. I've since read quite a few historical romances, but I would still say the Girl Meets Duke series is my favorite. These are just like classic setup, again, full of so many fun romance tropes, from like marriage to convenience and fake dating and courting and all of the fun stuff that lives within historical dramas. But what I really love about this series is I feel like Tessa Dare has really updated a lot of the important aspects of the romance, and ensuring consent and communication is really central to the plot as well. But each one of the books I've read in this series, as it's another one of those romance worlds where They're all connected. Each book kind of centers on a different friend within a friend group. This particular series has it all, an endless amount of attractive dukes, friendship and banter back and forth, of course steamy scenes, and just like a really fun historical time period to read and enjoy this series in. So I would definitely recommend this particular series if you're looking to check out some historical romance. And then the last romance specific series I'm going to recommend is the From Blood and Ash series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is a fantasy paranormal romance story that I am classifying under the romance category because if I'm being honest, there isn't a lot of fantasy plot. And also, the fantasy plotline is really just a repackaged vampire versus werewolf set in a fantasy setting, if that makes sense. So basically what I'm trying to say is don't read this for the fantasy plot, read it for the romantic pairing. I personally really enjoyed the first one, From Blood and Ash. The setup is basically you follow this main character, Poppy, who's kind of kept in isolation her entire life. She's this maiden figure, she can't be touched, she can't really be talked to. Then enter our male protagonist, his name is Hawk, and he's an assigned guard who's supposed to protect her. A bunch of stuff begins to happen, forbidden love and romance and a lot of political activity that kind of heats up the romance as well. I do want to quickly flag, I personally really enjoyed this first one. It kind of delivered everything I was hoping and expecting it to do. But then I will say I didn't love the second one so much, but I'm still recommending the series because it's so popular and I'm definitely in the minority in terms of not loving the second one as much. It kind of got a little slow in the middle, but these are steamy and fun, and if you're kind of looking for a romance story that has kind of a fantastical flair and setting and backdrop, this is definitely one to check out. It definitely kind of combines and subverts a lot of different types of tropes too. So while it kind of has that maiden guard trope, it kind of transforms throughout the series, which kind of keeps things fresh. But yeah, this is definitely a lot of fun. All right, moving on to the next section of books, and these are fantasy novels that have a really central romantic plot line in terms of its story, but also has excellent like fantasy elements as well. A true 1-2 punch, if you will. The first one I'm gonna say is Fire by Kristen Cashore. This was a recent reread for me, and oh my gosh, I swooned at the romance in this story. It hit me right in the feels. This story was so emotional for me. Just the personal journey, the relationship journey, everything about it just completely hit me right in the heart, and I loved it so much. This is technically the second book in the Graceling Realm series, but in my personal opinion, you can kind of read them in any order that you want. Particularly, I feel like Fire can be read separately from all of the other books in this world. That being said, this follows our main character Fire, who is half human, half monster. She has unearthly beauty due to her monster blood, as well as the ability to control other people's minds. So because of this, she's kind of removed herself from society and kept herself in isolation. One, because she kind of fears and doesn't want to use her power, and two, because of her like monster blood, it makes certain humans become drawn to her almost to the point of obsession. They can't really control themselves. Politically, this is set in a world where the previous king and his advisor, which was actually Fire's father, kind of had a reign of terror. Everything was kind of torn apart. But now these two sons of the previous king are trying to kind of grow beyond their father's legacy and create a safe and reunited kingdom where everyone can thrive. This kind of follows Fire. She kind of at the beginning of the book becomes involved in those politics, and she moves from her sort of isolated location where she's lived her entire life to kind of a central court location. And there we follow Fire, one, as an individual kind of grow into her own power, accept love without burden, make friends, and really just grow into her own person. Along the way too, there is a romance that is built just so beautifully. Initially you think it's going to be kind of a enemies to lovers, but it's really not that. It's about like two people growing to understand each other, like confronting their past hurts together and accepting love and trying again, and it's just beautiful. Like, you will just be so attached to the romance within the story. I loved it from beginning to end. It was soft and I felt like it was well paced. It didn't have like a lot of the traditional angst that you normally find within YA, which can be a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but I do think the sweetness that was present within the story just kept me flipping the pages, you know? So Fire has great romance. Speaking of angst, because as I just said, I love it within a story. The next three books I feel like all have that in spades. First one is Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. This is an incredibly fun YA paranormal fantasy story set in Korea, and this is actually said to be very much inspired by K-dramas, which now, having watched a lot of K-dramas, I would 100% agree to. It's an incredibly like fast-paced, super, super dramatic, but it really walks the line perfectly, which I feel like K-dramas do too, of being almost so ridiculous that it's almost unbelievable, but because it has so much drama, you cannot put it down or stop watching. So you get super invested within the story itself, which I definitely did within this world. And another reason why I personally love this story is I feel like it kind of subverts our expectations of the paranormal fantasy trope, because in this story we follow our main female protagonist, Gu, who is actually half human, half Guomo, and she basically has to survive by consuming the spirits of men. Despite what her mother has always taught her, she does have a bit of a soft spot for humans, but she always kind of has to keep a low profile, always moving around from school to school, until one day she crosses paths with a handsome boy in the woods and breaks her mother's cardinal rule, saving him. And so begins kind of the romance. It has lots of paranormal and Korean folklore elements woven into this story. And again, I personally love that the female in the story is kind of the dangerous, monstrous one, versus the boy is kind of the helpless, starry-eyed puppy that kind of follows her around. It's dramatic, it's so much fun, it has great atmosphere. Loved, loved, loved this book. And I definitely personally plan to read the second one, which recently came out soon. Next, I have a recommendation for all my vampire lovers out there, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. This was a recent read for me, and I was actually very surprised how much I personally really enjoyed this. And this is set in a world where paranormal creatures exist, and they're not really supposed to interact in any sort of way, because it kind of draws the attention of humans. So vampires keep to themselves, witches keep to themselves, and demons keep to themselves. But naturally, things begin to get complicated when Diana, a witch, and Matthew, a vampire, paths cross at Oxford University. Diana is an archivist there, kind of studying ancient manuscripts, and Matthew is a researcher and scientist. They're supposed to stay apart, but they're drawn together in ways they cannot explain, and things begin to get very, very, very complicated. I really like this book for a lot of different reasons. I think the atmosphere is excellent. I really like the two main characters. They're very successful in their own personal career. I definitely think it served this sort of historical academic setting really well. The author took a lot of care writing both of their professions. It was also really important to the plot. This has kind of a dark and brooding vibe to it. And the historical element itself, which is present in book one, I know continues to grow and grow within the next couple of books in the installment. This is great, a very classic vampire-based love story, but I personally think one that is very well written, lots of angst and atmosphere, which will keep you turning the pages. And the last book within this category I'm gonna recommend is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. This is book one to the House of Blood and Earth series, which honestly, when I picked it up last year, I had like medium to low expectations for, but I actually ended up really, really, really enjoying this book. And I would say, I would really implore you to try to get past the 50 to 100 page mark, because Sarah J. Maas kind of leads you down a road of what you think is going to happen, and then kind of everything changes and the plot itself really opens up and becomes very dynamic and interesting. This is set in Crescent City, which is this urban fantasy location which kind of houses all the different mythological creatures that you kind of find in a fantastical realm, but it exists and functions like a normal city. People go to their day job, people go to bars, people go out to dinner, all of those things, but there is structure. Some creatures have more power than other creatures, and there's also like neighborhoods where each one sort of lives and exists. And this follows our main character, Bryce, who would say she's living a pretty normal life until one day all of her friends are murdered and she finds herself central to the investigation. She kind of pairs up with this other character, Hunt, who's part of this like police force, and he is a fallen angel. Again, this is a story that I would say kind of subverts the expected. It has a lot of the fun, romantic, urban fantasy plot lines that you want, but I feel like Sarah J. Maas actually crafts a very interesting and well-explored fantasy world. The city is vibrant, and I love that all of these different creatures live centrally together. And the plot itself escalated pretty masterfully, combining, of course, with steamy angst between our two protagonists. I'm very excited for the second installment in this world. This was so much fun, and I just think the perfect kind of urban fantasy romance mix that will definitely entertain you. Alrighty, and then the last two books I'm gonna recommend fall into the sugar cookie, sweet, melt your heart, make you cry, root for these characters and their happiness kind of category. The first one honestly should not be too much of a surprise, and that is The House on the Cerulean Sea. This has so many elements to love, from found family and second chances. The central romance that's present between Arthur and Linus is so sweet and you're just rooting for them the entire time to ultimately just see and accept each other's love. I'm not kidding when I say it'll make you cry. Like, thinking about it, I'm like getting teary-eyed because I just loved them and rooted for them so much. But this basically follows our main character Linus, who works as a caseworker in charge of magical children. He basically spends his days checking orphanages, making sure everything is running tip-top shape. He's very much someone who does things by the book, and he wouldn't really describe himself as happy, but he is satisfied and he's okay with that. Until one day his life is turned upside down when he's given a special assignment and sent to a faraway island to investigate an orphanage full of dangerous children. There he meets Arthur and a variety of sweet and lovable children. Again, it's about Arthur and Linus's love story. It's about loving yourself, found family. It's so cute and charming. I love this book so much. But yeah, this romance, oh man, it'll kick you right in the heart. And then the second sugar cookie, I love them so much and I'm so happy they found each other, romance I have for you today is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. This is an incredibly charming contemporary fantasy story following our main character Yadriel, whose family is having a hard time accepting his gender. So in attempts to basically prove that he's a real brujo, he decides to essentially perform one of the secret family ceremonies himself with the help of his best friend and cousin, which is essentially to summon a ghost and help lead them to the afterlife. However, Yadriel slightly messes up the ceremony and summons the wrong ghost. Enter Julian Diaz, the school's resident bad boy, and Julian Diaz is not going to go quietly into the afterlife, and Yadriel basically has to help Julian kind of close a few chapters in his life before he'll peacefully move on, if you will. This book is full of antics, family, magic, and again, just the sweetest romance between Yadriel and Julian. They complement each other in such a beautiful way, where Julian encourages and helps give Yadriel the confidence to more boldly accept himself. Yadriel kind of helps Julian confront some of his anger and his emotions and kind of dive a little deeper to also accept himself as well. This book is so sweet, as well as the fantastical elements present within the story provides excellent pacing, combining so well with these character-led contemporary moments as well. It just, you won't want to put it down. It'll put a smile on your face. I promise, the ultimate sugar cookie romance. I swear. Alrighty guys, those are some of my favorite romance stories. Hopefully you found something to read within this video. Please let me know down below some romance stories you have loved, as I am always looking for new ones and I definitely want to add more to my personal list. But I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!